Well, hello, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers. I'm your host, David the Skeptic, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, David Russell. David, how you doing?
I'm good, buddy. I'm
All
good.
right.
Hanging in there. Busy
Fantastic.
week.
Yeah, very busy week.
Yeah.
We've got, just so you know, next week, let me go ahead and say that while I'm thinking about it. Next week, we are going to have a discussion with several skeptics. We might throw in a Christian or two just for the fun of it, but we're going to have some discussion on the subject of what if there was a God? What would we do? Would we worship? And I think that most of us who are going to be discussing this would not. And so we will have to explain why on earth we wouldn't worship if we knew for sure that there's a God. It would be challenging, actually, to skeptics. And so we'll talk about exactly what we would do and why. I don't quite have the full panel set up, but I think what I'm going to be doing, I'm almost sure that what I'm going to be doing is recording 30-minute segments with each person. And no one person besides me will know what the other has said. And so we'll do it like that and then put it all together at the end. It'll be a lot of fun. Like I said, we might throw in one or two Christians just for conversation in there. Russell, you're invited to be a part of it if you like. But yeah, it'll be a course of several interviews. We'll have it ready by next week. This week, we are going to be talking about, frankly, my favorite subject, the hiddenness of God. I have not talked about this nearly enough on Skeptics and Seekers, but I could probably talk about this every week and not get tired of it. I think it's the biggest of the Christian problems. It is bigger than the problem with evil. It is bigger than the problem with suffering. I think it's much, much tougher for the Christian to deal with. And maybe it's tied with another subject that I want to talk about, which is the subject of ex-Christians. The fact that there are ex-Christians, the fact that people have been on the inside and walked away is one of the biggest disconfirmations for God. I want to do that show. I've been working on that theme for a couple of years now. I'm ready to talk about it. But today, Hiddenness of God. We're going to skip a lot of the preliminaries because we just don't have a lot of time. We've got a hard stop coming up. My apologies. I had promised to get you some comments on the board. That's why I put the show up, the blog up early. We do have some comments. I would like to talk about them, but we're going to have to not to just to get into the conversation with our hard stop. So apologies there, and maybe we'll get into some of those comments in the next week or two, because I do want to get back to looking at some user comments and talking about those a little bit. So hiddenness of God. I've written a blog post, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. That's skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. You can read the blog in its entirety there. You can join, discuss, and comment as you please. Already a very interesting conversation. You can send me an email. DNB, no, I almost gave you my personal email address. That would be bad. Skeptics and Seekers at gmail.com. I think, and please visit Russell's show, please apostatize now.com. Or I don't know if I got that right.
Proselytize or apostatize. Matter of fact, we had a wonderful debate last night. I was actually the debater. David Paulman hosted, and I debated whether Easter was a pagan holiday. And we got everything pre-recorded and everything, and I went to go play it back to see how it came out, and my mic was not working the entire time. So it all worked through Skype, but it did not work through OBS, and yeah, I was a little disappointed. So
well, sorry about that. The good news is you were wrong, and so people didn't get to hear it. I don't even know what your position was.
Crushed, right?
It was embarrassing, but don't worry.
At least it was pre-recorded and it wasn't live, so I didn't have anybody in the super chat tell me, hey, your mic is not working. So I guess that's a benefit and a disadvantage there, but
I really like the secret chat. I like the interaction in the chat rooms. By the way, I've been thinking about opening up the chat room to everybody, just kind of a precursor to trying out live podcasts, just dropping the link and opening up the chat room and letting anyone come in and disrupt. Josh, you
Sure,
can say
yeah.
anything you want to in the chat. I don't care. I'm not
Yeah,
going to turn
and
your mic on.
a benefit of doing that is if you get like StreamYard, you can actually, if you don't want to actually invite people on, you can throw their chat up into the window of the stream, and actually everybody can read it. So
Yeah, we'll work that out. We got some
yeah,
things to work out.
yeah, we do.
I have ideas, people. I have thoughts. I just don't have time to implement any of them. But I suspect over the break this year, we're going to talk about some of the technologies that we'll use, and Skeptics and Seekers Season 4 will look different than the last 3 seasons. Thankfully, we've got someone who understands media on the show, and so we'll make that happen. All right, Hiddenness of God. Do we have anyone on the show who understands the hiddenness of God? I do not know what Russell's views are on this subject, and since I have put out a complete blog post, I can summarize, and I probably will summarize it a little bit for those of you who have not read it. And really, shame on you for not having read the 3,000 words of blog post. Don't tell me it was too long, didn't read. What I am actually interested in is getting Russell's initial thoughts so I can know which way we're going to go. Russell, what do you think about the hiddenness of God?
Well, you know what I was thinking? I was thinking about just going through your blog post, and we can ask questions as they go, because I wasn't able to write up my own stuff preparing for the debate this week. So yeah, let's go through your blog post. I think that would be good. A direct answer, real quick, is I don't think God is hidden. I do believe that there's maybe might be able to justify a shroudness. So there's a lot of complex issues. I do think theists need to address it. I don't think that it's something that they should shirk behind, but I don't think it's a bigger problem. I don't think it's like the biggest problem, because there's a lot of counters to it. And people like Paul Moser, I know, have wrote extensively on it. I don't know if you've ever had him on the show before me, but yeah, and not only that, but like you were talking about, I got a great Christian for you for your deconversion stuff. He's actually writing a PhD on it. His name's Joel Furches. So if you want to look into that, he's actually a Marylander, so he's on the East Coast with us. So.
Okay.
But anyways, yeah.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
you
I'd love
want
to
to
get
do
it
that?
on to talk about. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Okay. So I just wanted to get a couple of things before we went into the blog post. Like, for instance, you already said that you don't really think God is hidden. So that's big news right there, because a lot of Christians do say that God is hidden, and then they just proceed to give reasons why he's hidden. So you would reject that premise that God is hidden.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Okay.
I do believe in some sort of shroudness, and I do believe that the divine hiddenness does have to be dealt with. So, yeah.
Okay, so by shroudness, you mean maybe a little bit harder to see, but not completely hidden.
Um, yeah, it's complicated. Like I said, I mean, I haven't done research on this in years. So I'm going off the top of my head. So if I misspeak, any Christian can correct me. And David, you can take me to task. It's all good, man.
Well, I'm going to take your task no matter what you say. So
I know you are.
it's my job. So sure, let's go through it then a little bit. I actually think that the moment a Christian admits that God is hidden, it's game over. I don't actually see the point of playing after that. Because if I say I couldn't find God, and they say, well, it's because he's hidden for whatever reason, and they could say, well, he's hidden because you're a bad person. Great, it's fine. Whatever the reason is, he's hidden. Can't find him. We're done. We're done. Where else is there to go? I can try to say, well, I'm not a bad person, but what's the point of playing that game? He's hidden. Can't find him. We're done.
Well, I think we gotta, if we're gonna look into the hiddenness of God, and you're kind of jumping into theology at this point. You are jumping into the realm of theism. Now, if you're gonna give me like a Schellenberg argument, then we can examine that. But I think there has to be more said than that. Yeah, if the Christian admits that God is hiding, and there is truly good and bad in the world, then I mean, we still have the problem to deal with that God does exist and so forth, right? So we do have to deal with the problem of hiddenness if that's the case. But yeah, I have a kind of a nuanced view. So I mean, I don't know what direction we'll head, but
Okay, well, let's start with Schellenberg. Let's start with the whole idea of non-resistant,
yeah.
the non-resistant non-believer. Is that how it's put?
Yeah, it's non-resistant non-believers. I think that would that presents the best way to go about it. If there is that, then yeah, we have a problem.
Yeah, so that's a start.
Mm.
I would say that I first heard that term while listening to Unbelievable several years ago. I don't remember who the guest was or the show, but it was 4 or 5 years ago by now. But that show really stuck in my mind. It was a show of where Justin brought on some young man who was a non-resistant non-believer. He was even a churchgoer. Went to church weekly. He didn't go to church under false pretenses. People knew that he was an unbeliever, but he was doing the thing. He was trying. He had conversations with his Christian friend all the time. And much of the show was, it seemed to me, just Justin and the other guy really probing him to see if he was really a non-resistant non-believer or not. I mean, they have to acknowledge, yeah, I don't think this guy is lying. He seems to be a non-resistant non-believer. But it seems to me the moment that you have one of those non-resistant non-believers, or it's what I would call an honest atheist. I think non-resistant non-believer is a little bit bulky. An honest atheist is a guy who just honestly doesn't believe.
Are you an honest atheist?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you? No, you're not. You're an anti-theist. You said you wouldn't even worship God, even if he did exist.
Well, but let me clear. I am an anti-theist in that I don't like the God picture that's been shown me, but I'm an honest atheist in that I honestly don't believe it. So I'm an anti-Hitlerist, but I believe he exists. I'm an anti-Auschwitz.
I don't believe,
but I believe that it was real.
He doesn't exist anymore.
Well, he does, right, but I believe he existed in history. And so
being
anti something doesn't mean you're not an honest something. I'm honestly anti the biblical God picture that is shown to me. However, I would happily admit that he was real if he was real. So those two things don't have anything to do with each other.
I don't know. I mean, that does go against the science. I mean, if you really look into this issue, you have to look into the state of people's psychology at this point. So I think that you have to give some leniency to the studies that are out there that says people believe what they want to be true.
Well, I think
and that regardless if something exists and you have proof of it, a lot of people might not accept it anyway. Look at the overwhelming evidence we have on a spherical Earth, and yet we have flat earthers.
Right. And I don't think
and we do have people that deny the Holocaust and deny its existence.
That's true. And I think those people are kooks. But yeah. I think that whether something is true has nothing to do with whether you want to believe it's true or not. And in my case, I know that there are things that I believe and have come to believe that I never want it to be true. Just a little fun fact about science. I'm as uncomfortable with the idea of entanglement as Einstein. Now, Einstein's a lot smarter than me, so he had better reasons for being uncomfortable with it. But I think that really, this action, this spooky action at a distance idea is a little bit weird to a lot of people. And that it is a thing that when I first read about it, I wanted it to be wrong. I certainly didn't want to believe it. And so I studied a lot about it. And to the extent that I am capable of studying a subject like that, I have come to the conclusion that it is true, and I still don't want it to be true. So, believing things that I don't want to be true are pretty easy for me to do. I think it's a little bit of an ad hominem to say, well, the only reason you don't believe in God is because you don't want to believe in God. No, But I would say that if God is the type of thing that if the only way you can believe in him is that you want to believe in him, that's a problem too. Because if humans are truly depraved, they have no reason to want to believe in God.
Well, yeah, if you believe in total depravity that way, that it is goes against denying responsibility, I could maybe, but what I was gonna say is that, David, you're not everybody, and some people, and like I said, there's studies on this that say the opposite. They say that people will go with what they want to believe over what is true all the time. you know so there is that factor, and we have to consider that when we consider this debate. We can't say it's an ad hominem, because I'm not attacking your character. uh it's not ad hoc, because there's studies out there that suggest otherwise. So we have to deal with that. So there is a subjectivity to this, and this is why I don't think it's a problem. Because I don't think it's a problem because it's like me giving an argument from religious experience. It's a subjective argument. You say God is hidden, and therefore God doesn't exist. I'm saying, well, no, God isn't hidden. I think there's plenty of arguments. I think there's plenty of arguments from natural theology that I can come to that say that God does exist. And there's the resurrection arguments, which are historical arguments that come to say that, hey, yeah, I think Christian theism is true. And, that's, and you say no. So, I mean, it's kind of like
Right,
an
but it
argument from
would it
religious
would be
experience.
somewhat ad hominem if I said the only reason you believe is because you want to believe.
How is that attacking your character, though? I mean, that
Because
could
it's
that
because it's suggesting that you really aren't telling the truth
no,
about.
it could just be that you don't want it to be. Yeah, it's not saying that that's a bad thing. I mean, some people just want to believe certain things. I'm not going to say that that's
Well,
a
that
mark
is
on
a
their
bad
character.
thing. If epistemologically speaking, it's a bad thing. If the only reason you believe something is because you want to believe it,
Yeah,
then you're
I
believing
can
for
see
bad
that.
reasons.
Yeah.
And so I have, in fact, said that sort of thing on a number of occasions of people, and it is ad hominem.
Okay.
And
All
so
right.
I can acknowledge that because I am impugning your integrity as a believer if I'm only saying you believe just because you want to believe and you don't actually have any real reasons. And if you're saying the only reason I don't believe is because I don't want to believe, then you're actually impugning my integrity as a non-believer. You're saying
Okay.
that I don't actually have any good reasons.
All right. Well, all I can do is refer you to the studies on that. So there is a lot of bias in belief. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, and it can be once it gets to a point. But yeah, I see what you're saying, and yeah, I
Yeah,
hear you.
I agree that there's a lot of bias in belief, but this is why belief itself is bad epistemology. So you have to have an epistemology that takes you beyond what you
Well, it's yeah,
emotionally feel or want to be true.
yeah, well,
You're
justified true belief, right?
right, and that's different than I just want to believe it's true. That's different than it makes me feel good, and so I'm going to go with it. Right, and it makes me feel better thinking there's not a God. But that's not why I believe there's not a God. I stopped believing that there was a God when I felt better believing there was a God.
Yeah.
So that just doesn't hold with me, and frankly, with none of the skeptics that I know,
Okay.
because the people that I personally know who are Christians, they were people who loved God with all their heart, who were into religion as far as they could get into it. And when they started having doubts about God, it wasn't because they hated God or didn't like God. That wasn't it at all. And they spent a lot longer in the church and in the faith trying to hang on to it. So what you're saying
Okay.
just goes against lived experience and the testimony of pretty much everyone's
Well, it's not what
testimony
I'm
I've ever
saying.
heard.
It's actually, there's actually studies on it, and it goes deeper than what I can recall to memory right now. But
Okay, well, maybe you can post those links. So I question the studies.
yeah,
But non-resistant
yeah, so you
non-belief,
can look
what
into
you
it.
would, but so if what I call honest atheism, but if you want to add the non-resistant non-belief to just make it clearer, if that somehow makes it clearer, and I don't think it does, you still have to wrestle with the fact that there are people out there who fit into that category. And you have one of two choices here. It's very binary. Either there are non-resistant non-believers or there aren't. Which way would you go with that?
I would say there are.
Okay.
And but here's the thing. I have a nuanced view here. But yeah, I think there could be. Again, I can't get in the personal psyche of people. So
Wait a minute. You went from there are to there could be. So we're getting worse by the minute.
well, no, I mean, when I say there are, I mean there could be, yeah. And that's, and I can't judge for sure. I can't
Okay,
make
but you say that
a
you were
factual
almost
statement.
certain that there are at least more than zero people who are non-resistant non-believers.
I believe, like I told you, I think as far as my certainty goes, I think there could be, yeah.
Okay. So how would you define a non-resistant non-believer?
Ignorance. Let's go the ignorance route. Let's say they have no knowledge of God, but they would believe if given the opportunity. Yeah.
Okay. I don't like putting ignorance in front of that because that just says the bias that they just don't know the truth that there's a God. Um, you're assuming that there's a truth that there's a God. Whether there is a God or not,
Well, this whole argument assumes that God is actually hidden, right?
well, right, but whether there's a God or not has nothing to do with whether a person is a non-resistant non-believer. So you can say that's a proposition that could be true or false. A person comes to the conclusion that they don't think there is a God, whether truly or falsely, for good reasons. Therefore, they're not actually resisting the idea of there being a God. They have done the research and come to the conclusion that there isn't one. I think that it kind of poisons the well a little bit to say, well, it's because they're ignorant. Because now we're trying to come up with reasons why they conclude that there isn't one.
Yeah, David, and that's why I said I hold like a nuanced view when it comes to this.
Well, I'm just trying to tease it out.
We're describing two separate categories. I'm defining that there is a category of people that are ignorant to it. You're suggesting that there are people that are not ignorant to it, that have come
They're
to
well informed. Just
that.
well informed
Yeah,
people.
yeah. So at that point, I would have to question, okay, why what's the deal with the evidence that you're finding hard to accept? So and that's a whole different story. And I can't, like I said, I can't personally get into the psyche of somebody and see why they believe and not believe. That's why I think these type of arguments are just like they're subjective arguments. They don't hold weight here.
Well, okay, but the
To the
people,
Christian.
a lot of the Christians, people like Jonathan McClatchy. I'll just mention him because I've had one public debate with him. He does. I don't think he does believe in a non-resistant non-believer because at the end of our debate, I asked him very specifically, do you think it's possible that there are reasonable people out there who would have a different opinion than you? That maybe there's some, they're not unreasonable. They just have looked at the evidence and don't agree. Is it possible to not agree? And he doesn't think that it is. He doesn't think that it is possible for there to be a reasonable person who disagrees with him on the subject of the resurrection. I asked Lydia McGrew the last time I talked to her a few weeks ago, and she was slightly more conciliatory than McClatchy, but her answer was similar. Her answer was, well, if they know what I know, then they couldn't reasonably disagree. And so underneath a lot of this conciliatory language of, sure, there might be some non-resistant unbelievers, seems to lurk the real suspicion that there aren't any. So either if you are somehow a non-resistant unbeliever, it's just because you've never heard a presentation of the gospel. Now, I've given you a presentation of the gospel and you still don't believe, well, you're clearly not a non-resistant unbeliever. And so it ultimately comes to, no, they really don't think there is, because they understand how big the problem is the moment they start admitting that there are. So they don't want to be the jerk that says, no, everybody who is a non-believer is resistant and dishonest and lying. They don't want to say that out loud, but when it comes right down to the details of the conversation, that's what it ends up with almost every time. That's kind of why I'm pushing you on this a little bit. Either there are or there aren't, and you're saying there could be, but I wonder under what circumstances you think that is the case, because it is a real problem for the Christian the moment they do admit that such a person exists.
I don't think that there is that type of problem. Like I said, there's two categories. I do believe that there is the person that is ignorant, and there is a person that you're describing that is given sufficient evidence to believe in God, but they come to the conclusion that he doesn't exist. So I don't know what to say to that point, because if I think it's sufficient evidence and he thinks it's not sufficient evidence, I can't get into a psyche to understand why. All I could do is judge it for myself. So I don't know if there could be a person that has sufficient evidence, or if there is sufficient evidence that leads to reasonable non-resistant unbelief. So I don't think I could answer that fully. I think there is sufficient evidence. So you're talking to somebody that already thinks there's sufficient evidence. So yeah, I don't know how you would expect me to respond to that, or the Christian.
Well, I expect you to respond truthfully, even if it makes you an asshat.
Well, yeah, and I'm being as truthful as I can. Like, I'm trying to work through the question here.
Yeah, well, just work through the implications for a moment. The implications of the question, in case anyone, by the way, has missed the implication. The implication of the question is that if there are truly non-resistant non-believers out there, then God has not revealed himself sufficiently to that person. And therefore, God has no moral right to judge that person harshly for not believing in him. If that person, in fact, is open to believing and simply has not been presented with the kind of evidence where he could reasonably believe. That puts God in a fairly bad light if there is such a person in that state. Furthermore, if that person dies in that state and then suffers punishment for being an unbeliever. So what some people like Dale, yes, I'm invoking Dale here, but I think I understand his position well enough on this to do so. What Dale would say is there most certainly could be non-resistant non-believers out there, but they have to the point of no return to change their mind, and there will not be at the point of no return a person who has not had sufficient and convincing information, and so they will be able to make a choice. And so we know that anyone who dies and ends up in hell as a non-believer is really not a non-believer, because they would have had the sufficient opportunity. So yes, there are people right now alive who are honestly ignorant, say, and have not received convincing information, but they will. It's kind of a faith statement that there can ultimately never be, in the final analysis, a non-resistant non-believer.
And that's where I was going to say my nuanced view would go. I was going to actually mention this later on when we actually got to it, but you kind of just propelled us to it. Yeah, there are people that are writing a lot about postmortem salvation type stuff, like people are getting presented the gospel in that state, or in a state, as you said, Dale would say, of there's a point of no return where person has given the evidence, and at that point, that's when they choose to get saved or not. And it's interesting. I mean, you can look up the different authors that are actually starting to propose this. I think even C.S. Lewis talks about this in the book Till We Have Faces, something along those lines. But yeah, uh, yeah. I
Right.
mean,
Well, Dale would even say that the point of no return is not necessarily at death. So he thinks
yeah,
that there might be a possibility. He doesn't say this
yeah,
firmly, but he believes that there might be a possibility that after death, there is
yeah,
still an opportunity for someone to obey the gospel after they have um, seen sufficiently.
yeah.
Um, so
Hmm.
I think that one has to propose something like this. Uh, because, and the reason one would propose something like this is because they definitely see the problem of non-resistant non-believers.
Yeah.
If you didn't think that was a problem, if you're, say, a Calvinist, the Calvinist does not care whether you're a
Oh, I know.
non-resistant non-believer or
And
not.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I hear you. And I would agree. I mean, I'm not a Calvinist myself, but yeah, I mean, they're complete determinists. So you just missed the boat if you missed
Right.
the boat. Right?
This is why it's such a problem, I think, for Christianity, because once the problem is really outlined and out there, you do have to come up with some kind of theodicy for it, something to make it work. And so let's just run through. Let's run through some of this blog post. I was actually starting before the beginning. What do you want to just take major bullet points here?
Sure, whatever you'd like.
Okay, indistinguishable from not existing. That's my first bullet point. One of the problems with a hidden God, if he is hidden for any reason, then I can't distinguish a hidden God from a non-existent God. So, if I say to myself or to you, uh, I've looked around in the world and there is no God. You might say, well, you're making a positive argument, but the argument I'm just making a positive argument from what many Christians have already admitted is that God is hidden. Well, if God is hidden, he's non-existent to the one he's hiding from. Um, a hidden thing. This happens in my house sometimes. My wife, I'll just put it on my wife because she doesn't listen to this podcast anyway. My wife loses things from time to time, or misplaces something. Do we have do you know where the blank is? Well, no, I don't know where the blank is. Well, then you need to buy some blank when you go to the store. Well, but we have some. No, we don't, because not knowing where it is indistinguishable from not having it. Because here it is, I need it, and I don't have it. I don't care if it's in the house somewhere. If you can't find it, it doesn't exist. You got to buy some more. So that's my first minor point is you can't really get on an atheist for saying that God doesn't exist if he is indistinguishable from non-existing.
Okay, I think he is pretty. Again, I think there's plenty of evidence that suggests that God does exist, that we can come to a reasonable conclusion that he does exist. So I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, or what, because you
There's
didn't really ask me a question there.
there's no
But
there's not a
but
question there.
that's okay. Good. Yeah. So
No.
so yeah, I would say, if God does exist and he hides himself completely, yeah, there is no excuse for him sending morally sufficient reason for him to send people to hell. You're right. But that's assuming that he's hidden. And that's if he is hidden. I don't think he is. So
Right. So because you don't think he's hidden but only shrouded, we'll maybe open up more of what that means. So let's move to the next major point. And I think that we will have some conversation around this gamifying salvation. So here's the deal. I'll just make this, uh, I'll reduce this as simply as possible. To be told that to find God, you have to seek him feels like a game to me. Um, and so I question the, the morality of saying of gamifying salvation in this game of hide and seek. I will reveal myself to you only if you seek in the right way. What is the point of that? How is that not immoral?
Um, I'm not sure I know what you mean. Again, like I come at this from a point that there is no hide. There's just, God gives us sufficient reason to come to belief. He sent Christ to the world, and Christ died for the sins of mankind, and tells us, gives us a pretty detailed outline of salvation and why we need to be redeemed. And uh, his whole book is about redemption history. So I think there's plenty of evidence that suggests that that's the case.
What do you hear
So
when you hear seek and you shall find? Seek what? Find
I
what?
think it's I think it's more of a kind of like maybe a what are those? I can't even think right now. What are those, you're using like a metaphor, but it's not really a metaphor, but it's just like a exaggerated statement. Like we're already seeking for God. There's already, those big questions are on the table. And Jesus is basically saying, hey, if you want to know me, then, seek me. If you
Okay,
want to know more
why do
about
we
me,
need to why do we
seek
need
more,
why?
why not? I mean,
No, I
wh-
mean why? Why seek? For instance, David, I want you to know me.
yeah. So I would have
I
to,
won't.
I'd
No,
have to
you
have a
don't.
relationship with
You
you.
actually don't. I actually went to you and said, "Hey, I'm here. I'd like to talk to you." Right? That's not that's how it went. In fact, that's how it goes with almost everybody I know. Um, I don't force anyone to seek me out if they want to find out more. uh, it's not like there's this universal imperative that if you don't know David, you're not going to have a good life. And if you want to have a good life, then you need to seek out David. No, I'm going to knock on the door of everybody I want to know me, because you don't have to go through some kind of game. When I want a guest on the show, I send them an email. And if they say no, I'll send them another email. There's no gamifying that. If I want you to know me, I will come to you in a way that you can know me, and I will give you the opportunity to know me more. And if you reject me, I will give you the opportunity again to know me more because I want to talk to you. Um, there's no game here, and so we've got God telling us, we're doomed without him. But if we really want to find him, we've got to seek him. That seems weird to me. Just the idea that we should have to seek him, as opposed to him knocking on our door and saying, "Here I am. I'm God. Let me sit you down. Let me tell you what's going on." He could make that a very interactive, very undeniable transaction, and he does
Yeah.
not.
Well, he does. I mean, and that's what Jesus is saying, Um, I have come, here I am. Now it's your part. You're the next step's on you. And that's what that means.
Okay,
So
you're making statements that Jesus did, that he came and he did a thing.
mhm,
This is, first of all, this is a faith statement. Okay, it's not something that I can actually check on for myself. So if he wanted to be known by me, he could have come to me. Uh, he didn't. He came to some place way away from where I'm ever going to travel, a long time ago that I'm ever going to go to. Uh, and that doesn't really do much for me. Heck, I don't think it would have done much for people 50 miles away from him, um, uh, even in his time and place. So I find that insufficient if you're saying everybody in the world throughout history needs to know me accurately. So I'm just going to come to this small village for a few years, and then I'm going to go away, and I'm going to leave the only record of that visit being by very disputable documentation. And people are going to have to rely on faith as opposed to their greater intellect to believe me. That's not the same thing as coming and being known.
But it also is predicated on, once you actually take that step and try to get to know him, that he reveals more of himself to you. Now you're just going up against what the Christian theology itself. You're going up against what Christians have claimed throughout their entire existence, which is, once that we cross that bridge of Christ, that now we have a personal relationship with God. Now you're just going against that. So I mean, it comes down to, again, this idea that deals with the subjective.
Well,
that's why I don't think this argument's even that strong, because it deals with the subjective.
I'm going against
argument.
it, and I will get to that in a later bullet point. But the fact is, I'm going against the very idea that should be the case. That we should have to somehow cross this Rubicon of hard to believe things.
But that's the thing. You're assuming that they're hard to believe.
No,
you're saying
I'm not
God is too hidden. You're saying God is too hidden. No, you're saying that God is too hidden, therefore God doesn't exist, and that's just a argument that starts with starts with its conclusion. That's a circular argument. So I mean, I don't know where we're going to go with that.
I would say, though, that you would need to make that counter argument with Christians who are very happy to say that God is hidden.
And I would say that you would have to make that to people that say God is not hidden, like Paul Moser or Mike Jones or myself or Dale or anybody else that claims opposite, Gary Haber. So I mean, we could start naming that all day, but we're just going to keep going around in a circle.
I think Dale would say that God is hidden, and he would go with the route of he's got reasons.
I would say that if me and Dale had a conversation about this, he would end up saying, no, God's not hidden. He's probably shrouded for good reasons. That there's some shroudness going on. So if you want to address why maybe God is shrouded,
I don't think he would equivocate between hidden and shrouded, because if you're saying, well, he's there, but he's hard to find. That's
no. I would say he's there, and he's there sufficiently for people to see. But I think that there are reasons that is a sort of shroud. That is.
How do you define shrouding? How do you just define that?
Well, I mean, I would say that. Well, no, I don't want to say it's not equivocating. I just don't think that if God is real, if he produced himself in a way where it forces people to believe that where it can violate their freedom, I don't think that would be conducive to his plan.
Well, forces and violate. What strong language for just showing up.
You're talking about God, so that could be a reason. You have to deal with that reason regardless.
So moving through gamification, we don't agree that there,
No.
And we're not. But honestly, everyone should agree with me because, frankly,
because he is another. I am another David, and
Well, I mean, for that reason, they should give you respect. But you're a Russell and not a Johnson, so they shouldn't agree with you. I looked it up.
Just because you're the actual Johnson and I'm just Russell the Love Muscle, then no shit. Just like good.
We'll leave that one to let's just call it out. We'll leave it to Darren.
Andrew, because he's the one. Yeah, he's the one that gets that going.
Yeah,
I was thinking of him when I said that. So
yeah, that's not going to end well for you. So.
See, Andrew, you corrupt my mind here. No, I'm just joking.
So the next argument that we get to in the list is something that you had kind of said that I took umbrage to and said, look, we'll get to that next or soon. Well, we're getting to it. The fact is we looked. So if your argument is what you need to do is seek Christ and then he will somehow do this extra mile thing. Now he will reveal himself more fully to you. I can just say that's not true. That wasn't the case with me. It wasn't the case with millions of people just like me. And so that doesn't seem to correlate. Now, I think the best you could say, just being very generous with this argument, is that he does that with some people, but then he's just picking and choosing who he will reveal to. reveal himself to. But just because you choose to believe in him and you come to him with all of your heart and sincerity, that doesn't mean he's going to choose to reveal himself to you. So the if that's an argument that you're making, you're gonna have to let that go because it doesn't work.
I think there's a lot to unpack there. Uh, you gotta. I think there's one thing that you're missing here is that God can reveal himself sufficiently to people, especially his people, as they can handle it. So I mean, there is that notion in there as well. So I think that there's certain amounts that he does reveal, and that depends on the maturity of the Christian as well. So
Okay, so
I
if he
think
didn't
all at once,
reveal,
I think that all at once could inspire a lot of different problems. And then you got to ask yourself this one too. I just had this question I wrote down earlier from when I was reading your stuff.
go ahead,
What
knock
type of
yourself out.
evidence could we have without removing that freedom? And
Okay,
that has to do with the other
let me
part of
ask
the
you to ask that
question.
question when we get down a little bit further
Okay.
in the post, because that's going
Okay.
to go well with another section. But
Okay.
yeah, just with this one, I think that the Christian has a problem on their hands, and again, it becomes another type of ad hominem attack when the Christian says, well, if you had really revealed yourself, I mean, if you had really had faith in Jesus and put your trust in Jesus, he would have revealed himself sufficiently to you, whatever sufficiently means, maybe not fully, but it would have been enough. And if you didn't have it enough, then you weren't really sincere in accepting Jesus, whatever. It becomes that kind of attack. And if you accept that, no, there are extions, people who were sincere Christians who never did get that assurance um, of God's presence, then you have a problem. That's problematic.
Okay, but
Uh,
I justified that statement on the fact that somebody had already accepted Christ. Um, uh, I can't get in the realm of somebody's personal psyche and find out why they have reasons to reject God. I don't know. So I don't. That's why I said I don't think I can get really far with that because again, I think this is a subjective argument here. So am
right.
I don't think I'm insulting somebody for saying I don't know when it comes
Well,
to
but
why they
what
reject God.
the insult would be in the form of saying, well, you weren't a real Christian. You didn't really accept Christ. That would be the insult. Now, if that's not what you're saying, great.
Yeah.
You're not attacking in an ad hominem way. But if you're not saying that, and you're saying they did accept genuinely, then you have a problem for God not revealing himself to them in a way that's meaningful. So,
Yeah, and then we could get into the whole if they hadn't got any revelation of God or so forth, and we can actually declare that to be true. I think that God would, again, I would go back to the argument that we stated earlier that God would reveal himself to somebody that's truly having those type of troubles.
right. And the
Yeah.
fact that he didn't to so many is a problem. And once again, the only thing the Christian is left
I don't
with
think that's
is just attacking the sincerity of the non-believer at this point.
well, no, I mean, that's not true at all. I think that we're actually God's actually providing a way uh to be known, and he does it at different points to different or he does it, and in some way shape or form the person is going to be presented with that chance to accept him and truly accept the truth of it. So I don't think that's a problem because he's actually doing it. He's providing that evidence for them at some point.
Okay, well, it is then I would say cruel and still immoral. If
Why?
let's just use me as an example. Let's say because I know how much I know how much I wanted it to be true. And if God is going to reveal himself to me one day, let's say on my deathbed, um, how much life will I have spent uh, railing against the true and living God? Uh, how do you think that makes me feel? How many people might I mislead because God didn't reveal himself to me in a timely way? It's truly cruel and immoral if God is going to reveal himself, but he's like, well, I'm going to leave that guy hanging until he dies. That's still cruel. That's still evil. It doesn't save God from the accusation of immorality.
Well,
The only thing you can say is, well, he's got a good reason for it.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say that there's a lot of things that we'd have to examine in your psyche to say whether you're a non-resistant non-believer or if you're a resistant believer.
Okay, so there you go again, bringing
So
my
are
integrity into
you?
question.
Well, I mean, I'm bringing it into question. I think we all need to examine why we believe and why we don't believe. You know, I think we need to examine our own psyches in that
Right.
aspect.
Been there,
Right?
done that
So,
examination. We'll
okay.
always do that, but I'm not going to answer to you on the question of my sincerity.
Well, you don't have
Don't
to.
have to.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree
Yeah,
with you.
and by the way, you'd be a jerk to try to interrogate me on that
Yeah.
because
No,
you're not
yeah,
qualified.
and you know, and you would have to come to me, and I'd have to have my psychology degree and so forth. And you know, I understand.
Yeah. So what I went through is the three reasons why I think the hiddenness of God problem is in fact a problem. The next 3 points, which we will run through, are some of the major points that Christians make for the hiddenness of God, some of the responses to it. Number one, God doesn't owe us anything. Do you agree with that take from Christians? I know this is a very
Yeah,
Calvinist response.
I
You
do.
said that
I
you're
do.
not a
God doesn't
Calvinist.
really owe us anything.
Okay, you think
I'm
that God
not,
doesn't owe
but
us
yeah, I
anything.
do think that. Yeah,
Okay, I disagree. I think God owes us stuff. So I did
he
mention
owes
three
us.
things in the outline. One is he owes us the simplest possible choice, and by that I mean we shouldn't have to choose whether he exists or not. Salvation should not be predicated on whether we guessed right about that. Salvation should be predicated on whether we accept him as our savior or not. Kind of like the demons. It's whether they choose to trust him or not, not whether they choose to believe he exists or not. But God hasn't given us the simplest possible choice. He's given us a whole lot of choices that we have to navigate. And so I think that if eternity is on the line, he owes us the simpler choice, which is will we accept him or will we not, rather than having to go first through the maze of is he real or is he not.
Okay. I understand where you're coming from. I think he's well. Rephrase the question a little bit. I mean, the very first part you did break up, so I want to make sure I'm gauging it correctly.
Yeah, it's not so much a question, it's just a statement of what I think God owes us. I think
Okay.
God owes us the simplest possible choice of do we accept him as our savior or not. So he can say, here I am. Kind of like the show The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, a show that I've actually never watched in my life, but I think I know the premise. So you have let's say The Bachelor, and he's interviewing you know uh, 10 or so women candidates to be his wife.
Yeah.
Their choice is, after getting to know him, or his choice after getting to know them is, will I marry you or will I won't? He's not having to choose, does this woman that I've been given a description for, does this woman actually exist? Right? That would be ridiculous. That would be a ridiculous show at that point. No, here are the women. You get to talk to them and meet them and hang out with them. Um, the only thing you have to choose is, will I marry you or will I not? And that's what I'm saying about God. We should only have to choose, will we marry or will we not go through the dance of does he exist or does he not.
Okay. Well, I think he's given us sufficient evidence otherwise to come to that conclusion pretty easily. So, uh, yeah, I don't see the big problem there.
Okay,
Next point.
I disagree. You're wrong. The second thing, the second thing he owes us is protection against the powerful enemy. So I would say take the Garden of Eden story literally or not. I think for the purposes of this point, I would take it literally because it just seems to be how it's presented. You've got the new humans. They have one rule: do this and don't do that. It's very simple. So they've got a simple choice. However, what they also have is a demon or a demon infested serpent or just an evil serpent in their presence that's giving them strong and convincing temptations to do otherwise. Now, I would say that the story goes south in a hurry at this point, because what on earth is that serpent doing in the garden? Why should this become a game show? You've got your instructions, which you seem to be happy to follow, but let me throw in this monkey wrench. And I am saying that he owes us protection from that sort of thing, if he can give it. And he obviously can, and just chooses not to. He's the one who allowed the demons into this realm and gave them free reign to deceive and possess and whatnot. And so I would say that, yeah, he owed us protection for that. He didn't give it.
Okay. I think that there's so much that he does and that he can do. And there's also the aspect that he gave us freedom and responsibility to choose. So he gave us a command to obey. Regardless of what comes at us, we still have to stand up for that in the face of whatever scrutiny we pass. So there is a level of responsibility that he also gives us with that freedom. And if we violate it, then we violate it. So I don't think he does owe us on that.
No,
so you're wrong in that.
No supernatural forces should be allowed to come at us. You're saying regardless of what comes at us, nothing can come at us that he doesn't allow, that he doesn't want to come at us. He's the one who, for all intents and purposes, sent it after us.
Yeah. So, I mean, to have free choice, we have to understand that, we have a certain amount of responsibility. And if he took all that away, I just argue that, we really don't have freedom at that point, because he's going to step in. He's going to step in every time we have a problem. And,
that's not stepping in when we have a problem. He's sending us the enemy. So
no, the enemy's coming at us because the enemy obviously had a free choice as well that got him cast out of heaven. So, I mean,
he didn't have to have free access to earth. But he did. God sent him here. So that's what we're talking about.
So he allowed him to come here, and that's the thing is like you have a problem with the theology, so that it's not really a problem for the existence of God. It's
I have a problem
let's
with
talk
the morality.
about theodicy. Let's talk about theodicy. And
this is what he owes us. He owes us protection from supernatural evil that would otherwise corrupt us. The argument, you sound a lot like Teddy in this, so I'm going to invoke Teddy as well. Hello, Teddy. Okay. One of the worst arguments she's ever made about anything, and so that's saying a lot. Her argument is that, well, if God didn't send the devil to tempt us, then it would be too easy. Well, wait a minute. What's wrong with that? He gave us a choice, and what she and you seem to be saying is, well, we would obviously make the choice to do good. So he's got to make it harder. Because
no, I mean, we wouldn't have a choice. We just know. I would say that our choices would be truly eliminated.
Wait a minute. If everything is going well, we do have a choice. We're choosing to keep things going well. We're choosing to do the right thing. You are saying, no, that's just not fair. We've got to send a supernatural tempter with superpowers who can make you really want to do the bad thing. You're saying left to our own devices, we wouldn't choose to do the bad thing. It's not that we don't have a choice. We simply wouldn't choose to do the bad thing.
Well, I don't think the serpent was completely supernatural in that aspect. Maybe he was coaxed earlier and he just was like, hey, and then he came in and did the temptation. Well, I mean, we've got so many things to deal with that we have to unpack, and I don't even have the Bible out in front of me right now.
Okay, well, I assure you, a lot of the listeners do. and they know
And
I'm right.
they can judge for themselves on that.
Right. And but you
it's
could,
just a
it doesn't
problem with
matter whether you
theology.
accept, it doesn't matter whether you accept that story is literal or not. That's not even the point. The Even allegorically, what the story is clearly saying is God doesn't protect you from that sort of thing. And I'm saying he should have. Um, and if humans are going to do the wrong thing, let's do the wrong thing by ourselves. Just let us do that.
Yeah.
Don't send other forces against us. Don't we have enough against us already?
Well, not at that time. We didn't. We had bliss.
Oh, right.
But like,
so if we
so
didn't have enough against us, you wouldn't want to go on record to say
there's
that?
nothing. No, but what I'm saying is that we didn't have
We
anything
couldn't
against us
possibly
now.
have made a
But
real
what I'm
choice
saying
because
is
we
that
didn't have a
we had a
demon on our
choice.
shoulder.
We had a choice to obey God or not, and we chose obviously not to.
Actually,
So
no, we chose
think that,
to do it, and God sent the demon to make the choice harder.
again, there's several different ways to look at this. There's several different ways to unpack this, and the Christian has over the years, and there's different conclusions on it. So if you want to go that route, that's fine, but it's just a subjective opinion.
Not
to
unreasonable to go that route.
that
Plain
have
words of the story.
on
Genesis,
well, I mean,
Genesis,
yeah,
Genesis
if
3.
you want, again, if like I said, this has been unpacked over and over again.
Yeah.
So
let's read Genesis 2 and 3. They're very short. You can just read them. Skip chapter 1 because it doesn't have any bearing on this at all. So the third thing that God owes us, by the way, I didn't think I'd get as much mileage out of that bullet point as we did. The third thing that I think God owes us is clarity about whether or not we're on the right path. I think this is very important. And some Christians would say, oh, absolutely. God uses the Holy Spirit to confirm, our status with God or something like that. But once again, ask all of the people who walked away, or even all the Christians who are still Christians but still struggle with knowing whether they're on the right path or not. There doesn't seem to be any clarity. I think with all of the things that we have to guess at or just have faith about and are not sure about, with eternal destiny on the line, there should, at the very least, for those who are doing their best, be some kind of clarity about whether they're going in the right direction or not.
I think there is I think there is clarity. I do think that the Holy Spirit tells you that you are on the correct path. So I would probably give the same Christian answer that you said most Christians would give, that we are on the direct that path. So maybe you should clarify a little bit of
Sure. All of the
where you're coming
Christians
from.
who think that they're on the right path, where other Christians say those are fake Christians, or those Christians are teaching false doctrine. Those Christians really aren't on the right path. You just look at the Christian debates, whether it's on gay marriage or, any hot button topic, and both sides think that they're being led by the Spirit.
Well, it depends on yeah. You're looking at you're going through different issues as well. I think that as far as like the right path would be like, yeah, you're on the path of sanctification. Now that's a wide open book to where we can have wrong opinions and less developed opinions, and even make error.
An example that I brought
again.
up with Liz Jackson yesterday, you can hear the podcast, folks. It's in the discussion feed of the podcast you're listening to now. So
what did you do yesterday, real quick?
Discussion with Liz Jackson
On what?
on epistemology and also Pascal's wager.
Okay.
And that was from Dale's show, but he's already posted in the blog, so everyone can listen to that if you like. It was a fun show. One of the things that I brought up with Liz when she was talking about peer disagreement is she was saying, well, there aren't any real disagreements between Christians. We all agree on the core things. And I was saying, no, you don't. Give me an example, she said. So I said, baptism. There's a group of people who would say baptism is essential for salvation, a group of people who don't. That is a core belief. If you're wrong about the issue, you would be unsaved. It's not one of those you could be right or you could be wrong, it doesn't matter kind of issues. There are a number of issues like that. Um, and so I think that when people have the quote unquote wrong uh, idea about that, God owes them uh, the knowledge that you are on the wrong track, or the assurance that you are on the right track, because they're clearly doing their best, and they clearly don't have any real guidance on that.
Well, I think they do have the guidance. It's just how much how do you read the scriptures? And this is where I'm saying people can be wrong or right on it. I think there is enough out there that you come to the conclusion that all you can need is God. And I knew that there's several studies that have also been done on the convergence of belief when it comes to Christianity, and the core issues do present themselves pretty substantially and pretty poignantly. So I know there are people that jump onto different belief systems, or they have different things that they consider core, but I think that also is after the fact that, hey, yeah, we do come to this singular notion that Jesus Christ is the one that brings us redemption.
Okay, so you're
So,
just speaking as a person who's dismissed baptism as an issue. So you think
and you're
that,
speaking as baptism is an issue.
right, but
Okay.
you're missing you're missing the point, and
Okay.
you have come to the conclusion that it's not an issue, so you don't care. It doesn't matter if someone's wrong about that to you. However, if baptism is an issue, if it is true that baptism is necessary, you're going to hell. It is it it's that kind of issue. It's not the kind of issue where it doesn't matter, you can be right or wrong about it. It's you can be right or wrong about it if you're right, but you can't be right or wrong about it if you're wrong.
Isn't that how we come to conclusions anyway? Right? Like we
No,
examine the
no,
best.
you. I,
Well,
I
are
put
you
this I
kidding?
put this issue out there to just make the point that Christians do not have this universal agreement on core issues. It's you can define core issues in a way that none of the issues really matter. But I am telling you that others who are also Christians in the millions define core in a way where these issues do matter, and you would be on the wrong side of them, but you dismiss them because you just automatically assume, well, they're on the wrong side of it. And so it's
Well,
not an
I don't
important issue.
assume that. I
Well, you
I
do
come to it
assume that.
by no, I don't. I come to it by way of investigation, just
Fine,
like
you've
anybody else would.
investigated and you've determined that. You've determined that it's not a core issue. But you're dismissing the idea that it is a core issue for those people.
Because I've
And
come to the conclusion that this is true
and
versus
so
this.
and
I'm
so
just
you're
not
saying that all
dismissing
Christians agree on core issues, and you're only including Christians as the people who agree with your set of core issues.
that agree with not just
Your
mine. I mean,
set of
we still
your
have
set of core issues.
variations. I think there's convergence on core issues. So, I mean, again, that's something that you would have to come to the conclusion on that, hey, yeah, I did my investigation here, and this is why I believe it's this way. And the person that's going to come to their investigation the opposite way,
I mean,
I mean, that's all
we've
good.
got David Kimball Cook, who pops in the forums from time to time. David, I hope you show up. Yeah, I'm name checking David Kimball Cook. We've got another show that we're going to be doing this year, if all pans out. So David Kimball Cook, he's a unit. Is a I don't think he would call himself a Unitarian. It's biblical Unitarianism. There's a term for it, but he doesn't believe in the Trinity. And many would say that if you don't believe in the Trinity, you're not a Christian. That's a core issue. Then again, there are many who would say, well, the Trinity is true, but if you don't believe it, it's not a core issue. These are core issues. And so all you're doing is shaving down the list of core issues to your list. And you're saying, as long as people are in this list, then we all agree on the core issues. It's kind of disingenuous or blindsided or myopic or something in the way you look at that. But God is not clear to people that they're headed in the right direction, because there are so many people who are sincere who are obviously headed in the wrong direction. That shouldn't be the case.
Why? Why shouldn't that be the case? Why shouldn't there be a case of being able to come to a conclusion that's true or false? There should be
Because
absolute.
eternity depends on it. And we're talking about people. We're not even talking about resistant non-believers here, or even non-resistant non-believers. We're talking about believers in this case, people who have gone ahead and taken the leap, and they still don't have this assurance that they're headed in the right direction. And if you're saying, well, why should they have that assurance? I just say you're a moral monster for asking the question.
Well, yeah. If that's not what I was getting at. I was just trying to see, okay, what were you thinking? What's driving you to that question? So I'm trying to understand what you're saying here. Maybe I'm not
By the
understanding
way,
it
I
for
don't think
clarity.
you're a moral monster.
I think
Um,
no. I think that, like I said, I just think you're wrong on that aspect. I'm not like questioning whether people uh I don't know what I'm trying to say here,
Yeah, you
because
don't think that God owes
I don't
anyone
think
any kind of assurance, any kind of
I think
signpost that they're on the
I
right
th-
direction. You don't
yeah,
think
well,
God
no,
owes them
I
anything.
think he gives that to us. I Again, like I said, I think that when it comes to core issues, I think definitionally that there are a convergence of those issues that come through, and if you don't accept them, then you're outside that realm of a Christianity, of orthodoxy, should you say. So yeah, I mean, that's a belief I hold. So I don't know
Yeah,
what you're getting at, or how that comes into the picture. I
I,
think God supplies enough evidence to meet the requirements of those core issues. So maybe I'm not understanding your objection here or your statement.
yeah, I think we got enough to let the viewers decide.
Okay.
Um, yeah, but to the extent that you yourself don't understand, see. I think I understand what you're saying. I just disagree. But and I don't. Obviously, you're going to disagree with me, but I want you to understand what I've said, so that you can disagree intelligently. So all of these things are under the umbrella of things that I think God owes us. The argument for God's hiddenness is God doesn't owe us anything. He doesn't have to show up. If he does show up, he doesn't have to give us simple choices. He doesn't have to make the path easy. He can make it hard. He doesn't owe us any protection against any enemies he throws at us. And he doesn't owe us any clarity on whether we're going in the right direction or not. This is what the person defending hiddenness would have to say. And I just think that all of those are non-starters. God does owe us that if we want to think of him as a moral creature. Now, if we want to think of him as an immoral, uh, capricious God, then sure, he doesn't owe us anything. But screw that guy. What are we even talking about him for?
Okay, I believe that the true God is morally impeccable. I got one of Paul Moser's quotes here. Would always seek what is morally best for us, thereby giving us an opportunity to achieve, without coercion, God's kind of moral goodness. God, in other words, would be a redeemer, enabling us through knowledge of God to be rescued without coercion from our moral deficiencies, and thereby to become morally like God. So that's kind of like the view I hold in a nutshell. And you got a partner with you. Who is this? Is
Let
this
me see if
Flair
I can.
for the show here?
I'm trying to get him.
Calm down.
There
Hey.
Yeah, I showed my cat
You showed your cat last time
yesterday.
or something?
Yeah, and so this is the guy who's
And I
always beating on my door. And so sometimes you might hear strange noises like hammering or whatever. This is the hammer.
He's the hammer. All right.
That's the hammer.
But yeah, so I feel bad now, David, because I've kind of thrown my cats, both of them, off to the side here. That's probably why you saw my arm doing this at times.
No, I am constantly trying to tame the animals, and sometimes
Yeah.
the best strategy is just to open the door and let them come and flop down.
Yeah.
Because it's more disruption to try to shut them up and shut them out. So that's my dog's one appearance on Skeptics and Seekers. He's 17, the cat's 21.
Wow.
They are
Yeah.
still alive.
Wow.
So
Congrats.
argument number
Prolonged
next.
longevity there. Go ahead.
Yeah, argument number next, whatever number argument this is from the Christian defending hiddenness, is God did reveal himself. Now, frankly, I think this is the best argument that the Christians can make. I think to make any other argument than this is just to lose the battle. Um, they should just go home. But so I think the only thing the Christian can say, he did reveal himself and you didn't see him, and they should just go full on ad hominem. You're a sinner. You're rejecting God. Um, you're blocking out knowledge of God because he revealed himself plainly to people who actually want to see him. Best argument. It's unfortunately it's it's an easily defeatable argument, but I do think it's the best thing that the Christian could probably say to the argument. The problem with the this particular defense is that God did not reveal himself sufficiently to us. So the question then becomes a matter of sufficiency. So you can say, well, God did reveal himself. And I can say, well, I didn't see him. And you can say, well, he may not have revealed himself the way you wanted to, but it was sufficient. And at that point, we are arguing over what is sufficient. I contend that you are in no position to say what is sufficient for anyone else. You can only say what is sufficient for you, because sufficiency has to do with efficacy. You can't separate sufficiency and efficacy. In other words, if a thing is sufficient, then it would have the effect that it needs. You can't say a thing is sufficient but not effective. Sufficiency and efficacy are tied together. So, what is sufficient to bring about the effect for you may not be sufficient to bring about the effect for someone else. And so, God revealing himself is not enough if it's insufficient. An insufficient revelation is the same as no revelation.
Okay. What do you want me to say? I mean, basically, you made my point from the entire beginning that it's a subjective argument, and that's why I don't think it's a very good argument.
It's not a subjective
because
argument.
I could just say, again, I would just say he has sufficiently revealed himself.
Okay, but I just made
to
the
the
case that
world
it's
and to
not
us.
subjective.
And you are, but you didn't. You completely said it was subjective.
No, I
Completely
said
it was
I
subjective.
said that if it was sufficient, it would be effective. That's not subjective. That's objective, because we would have an effect. You're claiming sufficiency without effectiveness. And so that's kind of a nonsensical position. I am talking about sufficiency that is effective. And so let's just put this in another realm. Let's say you're an engineer and you're building a guardrail for a freeway, for a bridge. And in order for this bridge, this guardrail to be useful, it has to be able to stop cars from going off the bridge, traveling at legal or maybe even a little above legal speeds when they hit it. Now, if a car hits the guardrail within the limits of what that guardrail should be able to withstand, and it gives way and they end up in the drink, you cannot say the guardrail was sufficient. And why is it not sufficient? Because it wasn't effective. So it was clearly insufficient. You cannot say that God's revelation to someone is sufficient if after having that revelation, they don't know he's there.
Okay. I would say that God revealing himself would be sufficient. You're saying that wouldn't be. You're assuming that it would be insufficient, right?
No, I'm not assuming anything. In fact, I said just the
Okay.
opposite. Him revealing himself, however he revealed himself to you, might be sufficient for you. Why? Because it was effective for you. But it doesn't mean that it's sufficient for someone else. You can't just say, well, there's a one size all sufficiency. No, it doesn't work that way. And so if God is going to reveal himself to me, and you and I are different people, he's going to have to reveal himself to me in a different way because it's not sufficient. Now, maybe in people 2,000 years ago, in a kind of a backwater of the world, where education was hard to come by, it may have been easier to reveal himself to those people because maybe they didn't require as much. Uh, a lot less would have been sufficient for them. Great, not arguing with that. Fantastic. They have had a sufficient revelation. That doesn't mean that should be sufficient for you or me.
Why not? I think it is sufficient. I
No,
think
you think that
the
what's
evidence for
sufficient for
Christ is
one person?
sufficient.
Wait. You think that what's sufficient for one person should be sufficient for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, we're what is sufficient?
I just defined that several
Sufficiency.
times. Let me say it again.
I don't think you have the right definition. I can't speak to it because it's incoherent to me.
Really?
Yeah,
So you really divorce sufficiency from efficacy. You think that a thing could give me an example where you think something is sufficient but not effective.
I don't have one right now.
Okay, well then I'd say you're full of sophistry. You're
That's fine.
just trying to disagree, but you don't even know why you disagree. You just know that if you
I don't know if
agree,
I'm
your argument
understanding.
is doomed.
No, I don't. I just don't understand your line of questioning.
Okay, then
here.
give me an example where something can be sufficient.
I
but
think the
not
arguments
effective.
from theism, I think the arguments of theism are sufficient.
For
where people
whom?
can make
For whom?
I think they're generally sufficient to make
everybody, for everybody.
Yeah, I do think there is that everybody could come to the same
Really? What
conclusions, yeah.
about people who can't understand those high brow philosophical arguments? They wouldn't mean anything for those people.
Well, I mean,
so you would have to
there is-
reveal yourself in some other way, right?
well, maybe I don't know.
What do you mean?
I don't
maybe?
know. I
If
don't
it's
know.
okay,
David. I
so
don't have an
what
answer for this
What
one.
you're saying is that you agree with me that sufficiency for one person is not sufficiency for everybody, and that
Possibly.
sufficiency has to be effective if it's sufficient.
Okay,
Give me an example where
think, man.
something
I've
is
gotta think.
sufficient but not effective. I mean, we've got 19 minutes before our hard stop. I'll be glad to give you all 19 minutes to come up with an example. Okay,
I'm not prepared for that, man. I don't have an argument for it.
Okay,
I just don't. I'd have to research it out, and I have to look into it. I don't have all the answers.
well, okay.
I don't have the answers there.
I take one answer, but that's fine. So God did reveal himself.
I do believe he did reveal himself.
Right.
And
I'm not,
he
this
revealed
argument
himself in
even,
a
this
sufficient
argument
way.
isn't even that he didn't reveal himself.
I think that way was effective, obviously. So
it was effective for the people it was effective for, but not for other people.
well,
It wasn't sufficient. And in order for in order for God to be considered moral at all, or to have revealed himself to everyone, then it has to be sufficient for everyone. If you do a magic trick to a person who has never seen a magic trick before, they would believe that you have superpowers. Maybe you do have superpowers, but you just showed them a trivial magic trick that anybody could do, and that was sufficient for them. I know better. That wouldn't work for me. You'd have to do something different for me. Sufficiency is not the same for all people. It's a ridiculous idea. Another one of the Christians' arguments, I am trying to get through this because, once again, I recognize a hard stop here. God is doing us a favor by not revealing himself. I don't think I have time for both of the points here. I said that I've got 4 points here. So God is doing us a favor. You hinted at this earlier, and this is where I wanted you to bring up your point that you were talking about earlier. So if you remember that where that you had it on a piece of paper and you were.
Yeah, I had it written down on my phone. I can't even remember off the top of my head right now. I haven't even had my first cup of coffee this morning yet. So
that's fine. Let me talk for a couple of minutes. Maybe we'll come back to you. So the Christian argument is that, if God just kind of threw himself out there where we could see him and know for sure, then that would be bad for us somehow. And in fact, when you talked about this earlier, you used words like forcing himself on us, which seems to be patently absurd to me. It's patently absurd. Am I forcing myself on you by showing up on video and a microphone and proving without a reasonable doubt that I am here?
No, I got to go back to
I just don't understand what Christians are talking about when they say that sort of thing. Like, we can't handle the God. If he put himself out there, we couldn't. He made us. He made us to be in relationship. What do you mean we couldn't handle it if we knew for sure he was there? This is what he apparently does for many Christians. They can handle it. I don't know what on earth you're talking about that we couldn't handle. The truth about God would be forcing himself on us. First of all, he's not forcing himself on me. I'm begging to see him. Begging. This is not one of those situations where no means no. Don't touch me that way, God. No. Come on me, Spirit. Here I am. No need to force, doors wide open. Let's see you. What are you talking about?
I think that when you come to God and you're asking for that type of evidence, I think he wants a non-coercive type of relationship.
It's not coercive.
It very well could be. I mean, you're dealing with an all-powerful being.
Asking for an audience with begging. He cannot coerce me by responding to my request. We've removed coercion. There's there's at least one way consent here. So words like force and coercion and removing choice and things like that's not true. That's not true with me. Maybe it's true with some atheists. Maybe some atheists don't want to have anything to do with God. They don't want to see him. They don't want to know. I do. There's no coercion. What are you talking about?
See if I can find my notes, because
look, I know that we have a fairly short time, and you can come back at any time in the week. Put up some sources, whatever.
Yeah, I would have to look, David, because we went off on several different rabbit trails.
That's fine, so, but just speaking logically, this is the kind of thing that Christians often say, and so with or without any particular notes, you should be able to address my
not necessarily, because I don't want to misspeak. Why would I want to give you a half butt answer on that? I would want to give you a good answer. I think you're owed that.
Well, yeah, I'm not really owed anything, but
so you don't even believe the old crap you're putting out today. So
I don't think I'm owed anything from you. So you're not the one who's going to send me to hell. So you're cool. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, God, this idea that somehow we would lose our free will, once again, to invoke Teddy on one of the worst arguments she's ever made about anything ever. And she's not alone on this, by the way. I've heard many other people say the same thing. So not just picking on Teddy. I'm just trying to stir her out of hibernation, get her on the board. It's the idea that, well, but God wants us to have faith in him. And if he just showed up, then he would take away our ability to have faith. But the problem with that argument, besides it just being ridiculous, is it means that faith is exactly what we atheists have said it meant the whole time, which is to believe in things that you don't know. And what Teddy and others are saying is, well, God wants you to believe in him, but not know for sure it's true. And Christians are saying, no, God wants you to know it's true, for sure it's true, and here's the evidence. Other Christians are saying, yeah, he wants you to know the truth, and here's the evidence. No, when it comes to this argument, though, suddenly we have to have the kind of faith that where we don't know for sure. And God doesn't want to take that away from us by having us know for sure. That's just dumb. That's just that's dumb. Okay, then.
Well, what was I was trying to look through my my notes. I can't find it.
That's okay. You still got another opportunity. I'm going to hit this last bullet point here, and then we will have gotten through the entire note before the
dude.
my window slams on us.
You went through your 1,000-point, 3,000 word argument here that I haven't really got a chance to look at.
Yeah, I got one more. God is only interested in saving relationships. In other words, salvific relationships, not simply in being known by people. So I don't have time to read out the post, but I will mention that Mac Attack on the board addressed this. If you want to hear or see a Christian response to this, Mac Attack dealt with this on the board. He is wrong. I dealt with him on the board. I spanked him. He went away crying. He hasn't returned. Please come back, Mac Attack. None of this is really true. But he did address some of this on the board. And so the way this argument goes is God doesn't really want people to know him. That's not his point at all. He only wants to save people. And if you're one of those people who is not going to follow him, even if he revealed himself to you, there's no point in him revealing himself to you. That's kind of the outline of how this argument goes. My response to that is simply this. Okay, that's fine. You, God, have decided in your wisdom that I would not be affected by knowing that you are real. And so this decision is, you're just Calvinist at that point, the moment you say that, because God has already decided who I am and what I am. And he's already decided that he's not going to reveal himself to me. And so I never get a chance to see him because God knows I wouldn't accept it. You're just a Calvinist at that point, and we're pretty much done talking. And I think that's why Mac Attack responded to this one, because he is a Calvinist. So and he responded, I think, in a very Calvinist kind of way, which I think a lot of other Christians would dismiss. But I just find that a non-starter from the beginning. So if you want to say that God doesn't really want to have anything to do with you if he knows that you're not going to follow him anyway, then why did he put us here? Why am I going through like, kill me now? Just take me out of this now. Why am I here? What's the point? Okay, I don't. Right. I mean, that's such a ridiculous and hopelessly lost argument for anyone who's not a Calvinist, because for the Calvinist, there's a reason for why we're here. We're here kind of as non-player characters for the Christians.
NPCs, baby.
Yeah, that's all we are. But if you don't buy that, then you're going to have to come up with something better than, well, God only wants to reveal himself to people who are going to accept him. Otherwise, we've just been prejudged. I don't know why we're here. So, right. So those are the points.
Yeah. And I would love to be able to address your final points. I didn't read them. I didn't get that far.
Yeah.
I did only skim the top, probably the first 2 points.
If you want to submit a post, here's what you have to do. This is all you have to do, because you're actually a moderator too, so you don't even need me to do it. Just write out whatever response you want, put it in the blogs in line, and then click on the little squirrely thing on the right hand side across from your name, and then choose pin post to the top. There's an option to pin the post. You just pin it there, and it will show up at the top of the list in a different color, and it'll look like an official post. You can do that. Just put in whatever response you want to there, put in whatever sources you like to right there, and that will work.
All right. I will do so.
So
But yeah, I would agree with you on that aspect. If God, why would he put people here if he didn't even desire that all should be saved? I think that is a problem. That would be a problem. Yeah.
so
So
with that, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Chris, once again, I know you got to go.
yes.
All right. All right. Good talk. Hiddenness of God. Is this everything that I wanted to say about it? No. I
I
wish we
mean,
could
David,
have.
we could continue this on because it is a big topic.
It is. I wish I could have spent a little bit more time unpacking some of this instead of
Yeah.
just kind of running through it.
Yeah.
And you might have some people that you want to bring in on this. So let me invite you to do this. I've got the next couple of weeks probably sealed up on SNS, but let me invite this. If you have some slots on your show and you'd like to continue this further, bring on some other people, invite me onto that,
All
and
right.
we'll continue the conversation.
All right.
So proselytize or apostatize, folks. If there's a round 2 and beyond, look for it there. We'll announce it.
All right.
We'll throw a little bit of audience to POA.
Yeah, because
Proselytize or
yeah,
POA.
yeah. No, I hear. Yeah, proselytize or apostatize. It's okay.
Yeah. So we'll do that. In the meantime, next week we will have what I am fairly sure, increasingly more certain, are a series of 30-minute interviews with different people, mostly skeptics, but I do want to get some Christians in there, on if there is a God, and if we skeptics knew there was a God, what would our response be? Would we worship God? The answer, I suspect, for most of us is no. It is no for me. Um, and I want to defend why uh, that is that still makes us honest interrogators when we have these shows. We're honest conversants, even though we wouldn't worship. Why should God show up to people who wouldn't worship? Well, we'll answer that. Is there any scenario where we would worship? We'll answer that. And yeah, I think it's probably fair to bring on a Christian or two just to ask us some of the tough questions that, in case you think that I won't ask them tough enough questions, but you should know me by now.
And his response has already codified this entire show today about
Nope.
passive non-resistors. Okay, so believe
Nope.
that I
But
win on that one, buddy. You're done.
I
I
will
was joking.
but I will answer that next week. As opposed to trying to shoehorn that into this week. I will just leave that out there as a tease for Christians. You think that you have a trump card, you do not.
Oh Lordy.
So
Here we go.
we'll see that next week. Do you want to be a part of those interviews? You want to be an interrogator, Russell?
Yeah, I think I might jump on.
Yeah. Okay.
I would
So
like to. I mean,
I'm
I
gonna
have
do
two
one of those
debates that
shows.
day. I have two debates that day. So it's one I'm hosting, and then I got to redo the one that was lost through OBS. So
Right. Right. Well, some of these will happen throughout the week, I think. So, for
okay.
instance, I'm going to do one later today, and they'll happen throughout the week, but I'll put them together Saturday or Sunday. I suspect some will happen Saturday.
All right.
So, yeah, if you want to be an interrogator for one or two of those, be happy to have you, so that you Christians will not accuse us of dodging the tough questions. We have no desire to dodge the tough questions, and we don't have a Christian on the show. Anyone who's listened to the show knows I am the tough questions. I don't mind poking at skeptics. I like making them uncomfortable. That's my role. So with that, that's what's going on next week. The conversation about the hiddenness of God, I think it will continue. Maybe not on a show on Skeptics and Seekers, but watch the POA schedule from that, and we'll be announcing when we'll have further conversation. Anything you want to announce before we run off here, Russell?
No, I'm good.
All right. Until next time. And until I figure out how do you stop this thing?
I'm not a Zoom guy.
Okay, here it goes. All right. Thanks, guys.